Feudalism. This is the name of the social and political order that is in place during the Middle Ages in Europe. I'll explain it to you. But first, let's destroy Charlemagne's empire. So you remember Charlemagne, we listened to the song about him. Well, he dies, of course, and when he dies, his kingdom is eventually split in three, as you can see right here in front of you. His grandson, Louis the German, ends up taking over in the east. His grandson, Lothar, takes over the middle. And his grandson, Charles the Fat, ends up taking over here in the west. So his empire falls apart, so he's not going to be around to stop what happens next. And that's this. Europe is invaded from all over the place. You had some invaders here in the middle, you got some invaders here from down south, but our focus is going to be on these green guys up here, and these are the Vikings. The Vikings are the term that we use for Scandinavian warriors who came out of Scandinavia up here, which you remember from geography, all over Europe. They invade, they attack. A lot of times they sort of bring treasure and slaves back home. Other times where they find, particularly, sort of weak or at least weaker than them areas to attack, instead of leaving, they set up shop. So for a while they, invade Scotland. They take things from Scotland and bring them back home. Go and take things from Scotland, bring them back home in their boats. But at a certain point, the Danes down here, they go and they set up camp. They take over a lot of England for a very long time. The same over here. The Swedes come down, and there's start off with sort of invasions and raids and stuff, but they actually end up setting up some homes and stuff down here. And these guys, the Rus, the Swedes who end up coming down this way and taking over big areas here, become real important a little bit later in history because they set up a little principality here in Kiev. They end up conquering more and more and more, and the Rus become the sort of proto-state of Russia, which you guys know better today as, Russia. This is an example of some Viking treasure that was found in Norway. You can see it's a nice little, it's a nice haul, whoever this Viking was who brought this stuff back. What's cool is, we now can look at this stuff and we know where it came from, and it comes from all over. Some of this stuff we know came from the Byzantine Empire, some of it came from the Arabian Peninsula, some of it came from France, some of it came from England. So, we find this sort of treasure pile in Norway from someone who, whether or not they went to all those places, they had access to people who went to all those places. So the Vikings really, because of their, boating technology, they ended up having these really great boats. They were able to, bring back home a lot of loot. This here's an example of a nice primary source. Depicted on this stone are Vikings, and this would have been carved regarding the first Viking raid in Great Britain, likely by somebody who sort of witnessed it. So, the drawing looks like something that I could do, but it's neat because this is from someone who actually is there. They're saying, hey, this is what the Vikings look like. So what are the consequences of all of these raids? Well, the consequences are that people in Europe need protection. They need a political order to protect them from these Norwegians who are coming and taking all their stuff. They don't have the Roman Empire anymore. They don't even have Charlemagne anymore. They just have Charles the Fat, who's a poor replacement. So what do they need? They decide, or it's decided for them, that they need feudalism. What is that? Let's talk. Feudalism, whether it's in Europe or Japan or in ancient Mexico or wherever, feudalism is the system whereby the serfs and the people on the bottom owe taxes and loyalty to the people above them, and in return they get protection. So feudalism in Europe was characterized, just like in Japan, by a lot of division, right? You didn't have one emperor of Europe. You had many, many little kings ruling over areas much smaller than modern-day countries. They were in charge, and then underneath them they had the knights. The knights paid taxes up But in return, they got some land for themselves. Similarly, the serfs, way here at the bottom, they receive protection from the lords, protection from the knights, again, against the Norwegians coming and taking all their stuff. And in return, they owe their loyalty and they owe their taxes up. So when the Lord needs his knights to come in to defend against something, they've got to listen to him because he's in charge. But sort of in return for that, if this knight or if, Sir Frank gets in trouble and he's got, a Norwegian coming and trying to take his stuff, the Lord will protect him. So that, in a nutshell, is feudalism. Let's look at some of the characters real quick. Here you've got your serfs, all right? So your serfs are the ones who are going to work the lands. They're your peasants. Serfs, S-E-R-F, are a little bit different than just peasants because serfs actually are tied to the land. That is, they cannot leave the land. The Lord needs people to farm all their places. They need people to pay taxes up to them, so they can't just have everybody leaving. So serfs are actually, they're not allowed to go. They've got to stay where they're at, and they've got to work the land and pay their taxes up. Then you had your knights. You're somewhat familiar with these guys, probably from popular culture. They're the warriors. They're the European equivalents of the samurai. They wear, suits of armor like this, and they're the soldiers. They're the ones that serve their lords, and they, do the fighting, or at least the sort of elite level fighting. They also, sort of for the entertainment of the lords that you see over here, they fought in tournaments. You guys are familiar with this from medieval times, the restaurant, right? So this is an ancient depiction of it. So again, they did really do that. They fought in tournaments for the entertainment of other people. Last but not least, the lords and ladies, the princes, the princesses, they lived in big old castles like this one. Castles were really interesting. They were built for defense because these lords are not only worried about Vikings, although that, maybe would have been the initial purpose of the whole feudal system. They're also worried about each other because just like the daimyos in Japan, they're always fighting. So they need these big walls to protect them, and, you get the little castle system, right? Again, you guys are familiar with this from Disney films, but this was the sort of purpose for it. You had your, you had your moats, you had your walls. It was to defend you for the sort of frequent wars and instability that existed in feudal Europe. Castles aren't built so big with those big towers and everything to look beautiful. They're built for protection. They're built for defense. And last but not least, these are the terms that I'd like you to know. Vikings we went over, right? Those are the barbarians or the warriors or whatever who are coming from Scandinavia and taking everybody's stuff in the long ships. Feudalism is the social and political order I described in this video. A vassal in the feudal system is literally just someone who owes their loyalty up. So anybody who's not sort of at the top of the pyramid, right? Anyone who's not a lord, or a king, anyone who doesn't owe their loyalty up, or rather anyone who does owe their loyalty up, they're a vassal. And then knights, the feudal contract just is the deal that I described, whereby, I'm a lord, I'll give you my protection. In return, you give me taxes and your loyalty. That's supposed to be the feudal contract. That's the big deal between the lowly peasants and the lords. Last but not least, chivalry is a term you might be familiar with. It just means the code of conduct, right? The code of honor of the knights. The knights in shining armor. Usually characterized by a deference to women, to serve women, and just sort of general honorable behavior, being good, being loyal, being a good person.